Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sirius Report. Well, Paul, in the wake of Russia's new offensive, it very much appears that Putin has humiliated President Trump and is once again validating that the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely can. And this is a huge problem with regards to the Ukraine war and why there's so many parties to this war who, for different reasons, have absolutely no idea what's going on. And unfortunately, Trump's one of them. And his inability to read the room properly is causing all manner of problems. And that's multifold. So I think we'll start with Trump. And the fact he thinks he's got this really strong friendship with Putin, which he hasn't. And it boils down to one thing in very simple terms, as far as the Russians are concerned, if you support Ukraine, you're an enemy. If you don't support Ukraine, then we could see you as allies, friends, etc. Now, because the United States continues to provide Ukraine with intelligence, continues to provide Ukraine with arms and other military assistance. It doesn't matter what Trump and Putin talk about. In a broader sense, and I'm not saying Putin specifically would regard Trump as the enemy, but he sees the United States as an ongoing enemy. And it's interesting in the recent conversation between Putin and Trump that they actually spoke in English for the whole conversation, and then Putin got someone just to make sure in Russian that he wasn't misinterpreting anything. So he's quite happy to talk to Trump. I don't think he personally regards Trump as being the problem per se with regards to what's going on with Ukraine, but also with regards to the US's behavior in the war. But the problem is Trump just comes out with very irrational behavior. He says one thing 1 minute, gets off a phone call with Putin and talks like in glowing terms. Oh, well, now we're going to have a resolution and a peace agreement's going to be reached between the Ukrainians and the Russians. This is nonsense. We are a million miles away from that being the case, and we'll come on to that later on. But what also isn't helping with regards to Trump is he is being manipulated so badly by elements within his own administration, those who are very Russophobic, who want to see the conflict continue, who still have very bizarre ideas that Russia could lose the war. We could give Ukraine the wherewithal to defeat Russia. And of course, this is nonsense. We can crush Russia. We can destroy their economy, and we can just sanction them for the 300,000th time. And this time it will succeed. And of course, this is absolutely not going to be the case. And there's also very clear from the conversation that Trump, had with someone, and he was visibly upset. And this is where the humiliation comes in because he thinks Putin's his friend. And then he goes, I just can't understand why they've launched this offensive and they're killing all these Ukrainians. He just can't understand what the reality is and why Russia's doing what it's doing. And this is on the back of the fact. And it's not whether people agree or disagree, but there was this assassination attempt on Putin. It failed. Now, what does Trump think Putin's response to that's going to be? It's going to be an enormous response. But then it turned out that when Trump was asked the question about this, he didn't know anything about it. So some people will say, I can't believe that's the case, but it wouldn't remotely surprise me that probably Trump is totally in the dark. He's like a mushroom. He gets told very little. He doesn't really understand anything that's going on with respect to the war in any way, shape, or form. He thinks all the time, I can make deals with people. That's his belief. and he doesn't understand global politics, geopolitics. You can't make these deals, and you can't have binary thoughts that, well, just because someone talks to me and they're polite and friendly with me, that they're my friend. I mean, that's totally misjudging the room. And at the moment, whilst Trump's completely in the dark about operational things, what's actually going on, then he can't seemingly make the correct assumptions and assertions as to why there has been this escalation by the Russians. And also, he needs to understand that part of the problem is because of these massive drone attacks by the Ukrainians repeatedly, hundreds and hundreds of them, dozens of them targeting Moscow, is that they're getting given uh, intelligence information by the US about targeting certain sites. They're also getting provided weapons and weapon technology. So why would he not understand why Putin's annoyed? Well, because he doesn't understand that's happening either. He's the president who says, I want the war over. And of course, he's still humiliated by the fact that he said it'd be over in 24 hours, which was never going to happen. I mean, if he wanted to end it in 24 hours, he could have ended it by just saying, I know, I'm going to pull all military aid. I'm going to pull all military hardware. I'm going to force all these military contractors from the US and other support staff out of Ukraine. I'm just going to say, that's it. We're ending the war as soon as, from a US perspective. And then he could have ended the war in 24 hours, but he didn't because, again, we're not speculating. He's not running the United States. He's not the president as far as the Ukraine war goes. There are other vested interests, both inside the United States and particularly inside Ukraine and elements in Europe, and we'll talk about Europe as part of this shortly, who they're the ones effectively running the show. So Trump likes to imagine he's in control, that he can do these things. But again, he's been so manipulated. His understanding of what the Ukraine war is minimal. But he's also been humiliated in the process by people in his own administration by keeping him in the dark and provoking him to make irrational statements that actually undermines him. And in a process, of course, undermines the United States position as far as Trump's concerned. And that could be also potentially, part of a deliberate policy initiative to do that. But I think for me, that's really the discussion point about Trump. But he is being humiliated, and the humiliation is caused by he just doesn't read the room with anything. But also, it does just demonstrate that it doesn't matter what Trump says. It's not going to change anything. Nobody in the United States is going to change anything, no matter what they think. And this is why the United States is, and I've said this for a long time, the emperor with no clothes. And the Russians know this. By extension, the Chinese do also.
Yeah, I think because it's not just Russia. This is occurring with what's going on in Iran. With the negotiations in Iran is another really good microcosm to how Trump deals with things. And I think it's important. One, you have to understand the individual that is Trump. He's an idea guy with vision. You can't knock him on that. And he's also a shrewd salesman. Now, take those two things to be able to be a good salesman, a good negotiator, a good idea guy, you have to have really good people around you who do all the legwork. The architects, the developers. You have to have also people who are going to tell you to your face, no, you can't do that. And I think for the most part, domestically, he's been able to position himself with individuals who are both willing to say no, but two are very intelligent and can show him where this is right, this is wrong, etc. But in foreign policy, just like during his first term, he is completely off the rails in who he trusts and who he's getting his advice from. And I'm look at when it comes to, you made the point about reading the room. It's about he has no real understanding of the culture of these nations that he's dealing with. He has no understanding of the region, the history of it. This is not something that is a 20th century phenomenon post fall of the Soviet Union or Cold War. This is something between two cultures that goes back multiple centuries with animosities and some of the inherent things with those cultures that is coming to a head now, where in the past we haven't seen it. We did see it early in the 20th century, and then we saw it again previously in the 19th and 18th century. So Trump is trying to see, oh, these are just peoples and they're just numbers on a page. And so the negotiating tactics that I used for X, Y, and Z in the past, they should work across the board in everything. And Iran's a big thing. In a win-win situation, recently there was a comment came out regarding Iran where they said, if no nukes, we have a deal. No being able to process our own uranium, there is no deal. Pure and simple. I don't know why the Trump administration doesn't accept that and go ahead. That'd be a win-win for everybody. But no, I'm going to put my red line because it's my way or the highway. And all it does is create more animosity and more distrust. And I think that's one of the most important things is that the signals that have come from the Trump administration in regards to all foreign policy has been distrust, and we don't know if we can believe what you're trying to say or whatever thing you sign. We had the Minsk agreement. Well, that's gone. Take responsibility and accountability for the things that the United States government has done and try to fix it.
Yeah, but it's back to the fact is changes his mind. One day he says one thing, then he says something different the next, and no one has a clue what policy decision is. And then, of course, we come on to the issue of Europe, and that's completely fragmented because they've made a lot of noise for 3 years and none of it's come to fruition. And then Merz came out and made these statements, the new German Chancellor, about basically we, the French and the UK, and we're just going to give Ukraine whatever, weapons they need. And then the Vice Chancellor came out and said, no, that's not the case. That's not been agreed. So, Europe's all over the place. And why are they so hell bent on wanting to keep the war going? I mean, and the US is almost like, well, if you want to keep the war going, that's fine. We want out, but you can keep it going. So he wonders why Putin doesn't think the United States is trustworthy or a friend. That's, something else the US doesn't grasp. But the Europeans must buy lots of weapons from the US. So the Russians are also going, so you want the war to continue and you want to profit hugely from it because it's a business deal. Well, this is not a business deal. It's an existential threat to us. And therefore, it's unacceptable. And why is Europe doing this? Well, they want the war to continue for some principal reasons. Not because they want to go to war with Russia themselves. Absolutely not. Because that's World War III and Europe wouldn't exist in 10 minutes or 5 minutes. What it is, it's political capital investment for so long about Russia's going to lose the war. Now everyone knows that's not true. They want the war to carry on and on and on because many of them will be politically finished if the war ended with Ukraine capitulating or Ukraine basically having to surrender in terms of whatever this agreement would be, if they can reach an agreement, which at the moment is never going to happen. And on that basis, because they don't want the war to end, because their political careers will be in tatters and over, then the war has to continue. Also, Europe's on the hook for huge amounts of Ukrainian debt they can never pay back. So this is hence why they keep coming out with statements about seizing Russian assets, and everyone's going, you can't do it. It's illegal. And if they did, it's the end of the European Union, who, Europe's got ideas about trying to have the euro and the European Union as a more dominant economic financial power in the future, which is nonsense as well. Well, you're not going to achieve that if you go and steal assets belonging to a state, which is illegal in international law. But Europe's bankrupt. And what do? Approve another 150 billion collective military spending. Funded by who? No one knows, because no one's got any money. Excuse me. So this is a huge problem. And Europe's just creating this intractable situation, instead of the United States standing up to them and going, well, sorry, this is unacceptable. They're not condoning their behavior, but they're allowing it to continue. So the Russians would go, well, hang on, you're again complicit in this war carrying on. So we don't trust you, the United States, and we can talk to Trump. But frankly, as far as that goes, it's just a conversation. It means nothing.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting to take a look at is uh, President Putin made a comment that really targets Trump in the way that he deals with things, and that's reactionary. Because Putin said, especially after Trump made the comments that, "Oh, I don't know what's going on with Putin. He's gone crazy. You know, why is he doing this? Why is he killing all these people?" Well, if you take a look at it, 400 missile and drone strikes, and there might have been 12 to 14 people killed in collateral damage. In the scope of conflict, that is as minimal as it gets. But Putin said that Trump is being emotional. And that's another way of saying he's reactionary, not rational. He's very easily triggered when somebody tells him something or shows him something, but he doesn't have the entire picture. And so he lashes out, etc. And you could see this when he was getting off the plane yesterday, and he was speaking with the reporters, and he goes off on, oh, I don't know what's with Putin. He's crazy, da 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 da. And one of the reporters said, well, there was an assassination attempt on him. He goes, oh, I hadn't heard that. Well, maybe that's why he did it. So instantaneously, when he gets information, instead of lashing out, he suddenly thinks, maybe there is justification for what they're doing. And it's if you have a leader, especially a powerful leader over a country, that is ruled by his emotions, then that is a really detrimental trigger for how the nation is going to react to just about anything versus taking the time, sitting back and say, let me look into the whole of this and see if there's some justification and reasons for it. Because if you take a look at what happened at the Istanbul get together, Zelensky just pretty much came out and said, "We're not going to give up anything. We're not going to give any concessions. Period." So the ceasefire and the peace, move towards peace was meaningless. It was just for show to begin with. Plus, when you take a look at what, as you mentioned before, Zelensky, if the war is over, he's out of office. The him and his party have seized power, almost authoritarian power in Ukraine. Why do they want to give that up now?
Well, yeah, this is comes down to this point, and this is the reality that Trump needs to understand and understand pretty quickly. Russia has won the war. Russia will never change its SMO objectives. They've been the same since day one. They're well known, they're core issues. And apart from demilitarization, apart from no NATO membership, and apart from recognizing the Russian language, etc., in the country, there is also the fundamental point that part of the core issues relates to whoever, and we're not getting into this, who is really running the show in Ukraine, who is really governing the country, who's pulling the strings, who's responsible for where all the money's spent or not spent. Russia now, and people can disagree with this, it's fine, but Russia's perspective is very clear. Until those elements are dealt with, the war is never going to end. So until that happens, therefore, on that basis, Russia will just keep pushing slowly but surely further west. And Medvedev made this point. Now, people can say it's just flippant, where he said, the way things are going, we'll end up having to push the buffer zone further and further back till we control 98% of Ukraine. Now, I'm not suggesting that's going to happen. I don't think it will happen. But I think the point he's trying to make is that if necessary, the war can carry on. And they said when they met with the Ukrainians last time, this war can carry on for 10 years, 20 years. It will carry on until our objectives are met. So this is something Trump needs to understand. He needs to realize that negotiations with the Ukrainians, as things stand, are never going to resolve anything. Therefore, the war is going to carry on and on until the point when the Ukrainians unconditionally surrender and totally capitulate. And if Europe or anyone else wants to keep arming them, then the war will carry on until you, the West, have got nothing else to give them. And it's as simple as that. And this is why Europe can't do anything. It likes to think it is. It's got delusions of grandeur. It's got ideas above its station, but it's also trying to save its own political collective skin and deal with the fact that it's bankrupt and it can't be on the hook for all the Ukrainian debt. Trump needs to understand the reality, realize the people in his administration who are very badly advising him, and he needs to become more rational, assess everything, and come to the conclusion that there is no end to this war unless this happens. But the problem is, and in spite of all this, Trump will never want to have to pull out and go, we lost the war effectively. So everyone knows the collective West lost the war. He can't do that. He can't face that humiliation. But therefore the alternative is he thinks, well, if I get a negotiated settlement, I'm the peacekeeper. Look, I ended the war, and I ended it on the basis of a peace agreement, which I was the one who engineered it. That's not going to happen either. So until the intractable position somehow changes in the US and Europe, which at the moment there's no chance that's going to happen, then there's no end to the war. But in the process, the longer this drags on, the more weak and ineffectual the United States looks, the more it looks like the emperor with no clothes. And unfortunately, the more humiliated and frustrated Trump's likely to be, which is only going to increase his irrational behavior, which is only going to exacerbate problems and not resolve them. So that's effectively where we are for now. So it's going to require a Herculean change of attitude, really, in the United States, to have a hope of ending the war soon or yesterday or tomorrow at the latest. Otherwise, it carries on and until Russia achieves its objectives. And we could be still talking about this war in 2 or 3 years on that basis. Potentially, I think it's doubtful because I don't think Ukraine has got much, or no one's got much left to give the Ukrainians. Ignore the hot air that comes out of the Europeans. They like to say a lot, but deep down they're just yapping chihuahuas. And as soon as the US, which I've always, to use an analogy, call it a Rottweiler, even though Rottweilers are generally quite nice dogs, contrary to popular opinion. But that's the analogy. They want to hide behind the Rottweiler, and the Rottweiler's no longer there. And then they'll just walk off into the night. But still, they can't end the war because politically it's finished, most of them. And they've got the whole issue of saddled with all the Ukrainian debt, or large part of it. And this is the total mess we find ourselves in, and this completely intractable position.
Yeah, I think a good place to end it would be a tweet that Colonel McGregor put out yesterday. President Trump had a huge opportunity when he came into office to suspend all further aid to Ukraine and make it clear we want nothing to do with this. Unfortunately, he doubled down and signed on for more aid packages. This took away any leverage the U.S. had with Russia, and it's now completely off the table. So, from the very beginning, had Trump looked into this, understood, read the room, knew the region, and knew what was going on, he could have made a choice. He could have forced Europe to capitulate and stop, forced NATO out of it. He could have worked with Russia, and things probably would have come to a relative close before now. Unfortunately, he made the wrong decision, and now he is completely out of the loop. Well, Paul, I think that about covers what we wanted to push today.
Yeah, absolutely.
To everybody here at the Sirius Report community, thank you as always for your support. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, send this out to anybody you think it might be important to. And until the next time we get together, have a great day.